5 years after Fulton County became embroiled in allegations of fraud over the 2020 presidential election, the Justice Department wants county officials to turn over those election records.
But county leaders say they're not turning over any documents. Fox 5's Deidre Dukes joins us here live on set with these newest developments. Deidre.
That's right. Talking today with Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts. He says he finds it ironic that we're talking about this when Fulton County just completed a successful election this week. He says Georgians have moved past 2020 and that the Trump administration needs to do the same.
Now I want y'all to check this out, so lean in. What if I told you that 315,000 votes in Georgia were walking around without a signature to their name? We're talking about a total breakdown of the system. A federal lawsuit that got the DOJ knocking on the door, and a secret admission that changed everything. You think you know how elections are verified? Trust me, you don't. We're going deep into a story where the government wants to see your business, but when the fraud is on their part, they want you to back off. So stay tuned, because what I'm about to show you is why a blank piece of paper is about the most dangerous thing floating around in Georgia right now. Alright, let's get into the meat of it. We're digging into some messy business down in Fulton County. It's a situation where two big ideas, election transparency and voter privacy, decide to crash into each other like a three-car pileup during rush hour. It's all over a federal lawsuit that might just change the way we look at our ballots for good. Now look at this number, 315,000. That ain't just some random math I'm pulling out of the air. That's a massive batch of early votes from 2020 that has become the target of some real intense heat. Now there's a specific reason why these votes are under the microscope that most people are completely missing. But hold on, I'm gonna get to that in a second. Let's look at the receipts first. So what's the story? We're talking about activists, high-priced lawyers, and court battles that are simmering while we speak. What's wild is that it didn't even blow up right away. It took a couple years for this legal challenge to bring this procedural mess out of the shadows. Back in March of 2022, an activist named David Cross stepped up and said, "Y'all ain't following the law." He's the one that filed the complaint, pulled the records, paid for the data, and went line by line to what Fulton County turned over. In other words, he's not reacting to headlines, he's reacting to paperwork. Actual paperwork. Now here's the thing, so don't blink, because what he says at the beginning should sound wild, and what he says in the middle sounds technical. But what he says at the end, is where you go, wait, how does that even happen? So don't jump ahead, don't click off, let him finish the thought. Because once you hear the last part, everything before it hits different. This is part one. Part two flips the perspective. And by the end, you're gonna have to decide which story holds up. Alright, listen close.
I filed this complaint in March of 2022 with the State Election Board, documenting systemic violations of Georgia law in Fulton County's handling of advanced voting in 2020. Our group paid Fulton County $15,800 in an open records request, where the county turned over 77 megabytes of records, every tabulator tape representing 315,000 votes. The state election rules are crystal clear. On page 2, you'll see the Georgia Rule 183-1-12.112 or .12 requires every Dominion tabulator to print exactly 3 tapes at the close of each advanced voting day. All 3 tapes must be witnessed and signed by 3 poll workers, or their reason for refusal must be noted. 1 signed tape goes on the polling place door, the second goes on a sealed envelope with a memory card, and the third goes in an envelope with a polling place recap form. These signed tapes are the sole legal certification that the reported totals are authentic. Fulton County produced 0 signed tabulator tapes in early voting, as you just heard. Not 1 for early voting. Every signature block is blank. 10 of these unsigned tabulator tapes are from Mr. Rossi and Mr. Moncala's SEB 2022-025 case on page 3. We found identical protective counters across several different polling places, polls that were opened 8 days late, polls closed at impossibly late hours like 2:09 a.m. in the morning, and poll closing times that do not match the tapes on pages 4 and 5. On pages 6, 7, 11, and 12, we found duplicated scanner serial numbers, where the memory devices were removed from one scanner and printed on an alternate scanner. These are not clerical errors. They are catastrophic breaks in chain of custody and certification.
Now you heard him? Let that sink in for a second. It took almost 16 grand just to pry the records loose. And what came back? Every tabulator tied to over 300,000 votes. That part alone is enough to raise anybody's antenna. But the real issue? Georgia law is simple on this. 3 tapes, signed, witnessed. No signatures means no legal certification, period. And what did Fulton County turn over? 0 signed tapes for early voting. Not a few missing, not some errors, 0. Every signature box was just blank. Then you get into the rest of it. Identical counters popping up at different locations, polls opening days late, closing times that don't add up, 2:09 in the morning. Now how does that work? Now about those tabulation tapes. Think of these tapes like a receipt you get at the grocery store. If you bought a gallon of milk, that receipt shows that you paid for it and it belongs to you. Georgia law is very clear. Poll workers gotta sign those tapes to certify that those numbers are right. If there ain't no signatures, that vote is basically a ghost. It's there, but it ain't got no ID to prove that it should be there. In other words, it's uncertified. But it wasn't just 1 or 2 tapes. We're talking about 134 of them. Imagine walking out of a store with 134 bags of groceries and none of your receipts are signed. Security is gonna have some questions, right? Well, here's where it gets real juicy. In December of 2023, the county's own lawyer, Anne Brumbach, stood up in court and basically admitted it. She said, and I'm quoting here, "We don't dispute the allegation that the tapes were not signed." Man, when she said that, the whole room should have got quiet. I want you to watch her closely. She just walks in carefully, low voice, measured. She sounds totally scared. Every word she mutters sounds like it's cleared legally first. You can hear it. She's picking words and not telling a story. She starts off polite by buttering up the magistrate. She's respectful. Then she slides in and talks about the old staff, the ones who actually knew the procedure and how things weren't ideal. She doesn't say messed up. She doesn't say wrong. She just glides past it. Then quietly, she lets you know they're all gone. No discipline, no write-ups, no consequences, just replaced. And that's when her tone shifts. New team, new rules. Now if procedures aren't followed, maybe there's consequences. Maybe. Not did. Not will. Maybe. So let me say what she won't. Why is she still standing there while the staff is gone? Why does accountability stop right before it hits the top?
This is my good afternoon for the next 10 or 15 cases.
Yeah, sticking with you here.
I've not seen the tapes myself, but we do not dispute that the tapes were not signed. It was a violation of the rule. Since 2020, again, we have new leadership and a new building and a new board and new standard operating procedures. And since then, the training has been enhanced. The poll watchers are trained specifically. They've got to sign the tapes in the morning and they've got to sign the tapes when they're run at the end of the day. When the tapes come back to the hub for, with all the documentation, they are checked again. And if somebody forgot to sign a tape, then Fulton initiates an investigation. But we don't dispute the allegation from the 2020 election.
And don't ignore the elephant in the room. Raffensperger. Somebody signed off, somebody certified, and somehow that parts keep getting backgrounded. Now at some point, process issues stop sounding like mistakes. Instead, they sound like protections. And check this out. It wasn't just the signatures. They found a record for a machine they called ICP3 that had a serial number for a totally different machine, which was the ICP2. Now let's talk about that VIN number example I gave. Imagine you buying a clean-looking Cadillac, but when you check the VIN number on the dashboard, it's actually registered to a 1998 Honda Civic. You know something ain't right. Now that's a break in the chain of custody, and in the world of elections, that's a cardinal sin. Now I'm about to show you why the DOJ decided to kick the door down, and it ain't for the reason you think. But let me circle back to that pattern I mentioned earlier. So the Department of Justice slides in like, move over and let the big dogs handle this. and they used the Civil Rights Act of 1960 to demand those 2020 records. The Department of Justice argument is straight to the point. We sent a written demand, and the law states that that's all we have to do. The county didn't produce the records, so now we seeing you in federal court. But hold up, a bunch of local groups and unions jumped in to stop them. I call them actors. They're saying, if you let the feds rummage through sealed ballots years later, you gotta scare people away from the polls. They're calling it a chilling effect. Plus, they said that the DOJ is late to the party. The law says that you only gotta keep those records for 22 months, and that clock ran out a long time ago. They're basically telling the feds, your warrant expired, go home. So let's break down what we just covered so you got it straight. The number is 315,000 votes with no signatures on the tapes. The admission? The county lawyer basically said, yeah, we messed up. The conflict? The DOJ wants the truth, but local groups want to protect your privacy. Now I'm going to tell you how I see it. To me, it feels like the Democrats are just trying to obfuscate and hide the real story. And I know I ain't the only one feeling like this. Most folks who voted for President Trump, millions of people who just wanted a fair shake, see exactly what's going on. They see cheating, especially in Fulton County. And let's be real. If they're using these tricks in one county, you know they're doing it across the whole state and probably the whole country. In my personal belief, these elections were unfair, point blank. If those votes were tabulated right away, Trump probably would have walked away with another 2 million votes easily. It feels like the Democrats will do anything to stay in power. They stand there and talk about democracy, the American people, and justice, but let's look at the receipts. They only want justice when they aren't the ones being caught red-handed. When you boil it all down, it's a head-on collision. You need transparency so we know that the math is right, but you also need privacy so people feel safe voting. Both sides are claiming that they're the ones who's protecting democracy. It's a messy question the courts gotta figure out, and the answer is gonna hit way harder than just one county in Georgia. It's about where we draw that line. Now, if this breakdown helped you see the full picture, do me a favor. Toss this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. It's food for the algorithm, and it helps me keep bringing you the realness. What do you think? Transparency or privacy? Let me know. Now that you heard both sides of the story, tell me which one feels real. What comes next? It builds right off of this. This ain't over, but it is on the record, and I'll see you in the video above.
So while Fulton County must now deal with this request at the federal level, its ongoing battle with the state elections board continues to wind its way through the courts, and we've not received an update as to where they are in that process.
All right. To be continued.